So in August, tarot changed for me forever, and I'm going to tell you why in this video. But first, it starts with voices. I think we all have voices when we work with tarot. First of all, when I work with tarot, there's my voice inside my head discussing the meaning of the cards with me, asking questions, discussing with myself this or that, piecing together meanings. It's my own voice. Then sneaks in the voice of the deck, and I think if you've worked with more than one deck, you may agree with me that your decks have different ways of speaking, shall we say. They have different voices. Then beyond that, you may, like me, also find that you hear deity coming in. This is why I shuffle and read jumpers. Allowing jumpers to come into my reading allows for deity and other spirits to get involved in card choice. I've also got a couple of decks where the voices of ancestors came through, so these decks now put aside for mediumship readings. These are the voices that have probably surprised me the most in my tarot practice. Always unasked for, always unexpected. So there's a potential for lots of voices. It's a cacophony sometimes of noise. And people may say, oh, voices in your head, isn't that a bad sign? Are you just mad? You're just imagining it at best. It's just your imagination. And when I hear that, I remember that amazing scene in Harry Potter where Dumbledore is talking to Harry in the spirit train station. That wonderful moment where Harry asks Dumbledore, well, isn't this just happening inside of my head? And Dumbledore replies, of course it is happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean that it is not real? I loved that. And then in this book, The Art of Cosmic Creation by Amber Torn, Amber speaks of imagination as well as something way more mystical than just making it up inside your head. She states that imagination is a tool to connect with your spirit. She describes it as literally a vehicle to connect with the universe and the energy beyond yourself. A tool for cosmic creation, she says. Imagination has infinite possibilities. It is a very real thing. So all of this to say that all of those voices that come into play with tarot shouldn't be dismissed as just your imagination, without also acknowledging that just your imagination is one of the most magical tools that you possess to work with. Your imagination is a portal to very real magic. So don't discount your magic by saying it's just in my head or it's just my imagination. For if we do that, we discount all the voices that come to us. And for me, last month, it was one of these voices that changed tarot for me forever. A voice that came to me walking this beautiful forestry commission land in Wales. The voice of Genius Loci, the spirit of place, the whispers of nature that can be found, well, anywhere. Not just in magical glades like this one. A glade where moss and ferns reside together, a sure sign of magic to come. At the end of the glade, a fallen tree next to a bridge. The bridge, a way of stepping over into the new, and yet trauma still there on the other side, still there, speaking loud and clear. This not the first time that I've shared a fallen tree voice on my channel. a ripping up from the roots, the trauma of that keying into my psyche. Where stability once resided, a void now rent open, a literal mouth. And from this mouth, the first questions. Why are you still here, unstable, unrooted, holding on to the cruelty that saw you fall? Why have you not crossed the bridge yet? I smiled. I knew this was a call to pull the tarot out of my bag that I carried. This undeniably so, as I rounded the corner and saw this sentinel tree. The voice came again. Step through my portal and I will show you how to cross the bridges that you make. I looked around for somewhere to sit to pull my cards, for it was so clear that the voice of this forest was calling to the cards in my bag, devising a spread, asking the questions, walking alongside the tarot to help me. Tarot and nature inexplicably linked in these voices. There was nowhere to sit. The voice came again. Keep walking. I will give you somewhere to sit. So I carried on walking up this path. It was hot and muggy, I could barely breathe. And then from nowhere, a bench. My somewhere to sit delivered. I sat to pull the first two cards. Why am I still stuck? The question from the fallen tree. And I pulled my significator card, the Page of Cups. In this deck, a mermaid princess evolution. My significator because of the way I've loved in the past, codependent, overgiving, people-pleasing, wrapped in naivety, and racing away to the ocean to escape when it was all too much. The Gill Tarot tells us that mermaids undergo great suffering in order to win human love. It seems like my significator might be in need of some evolution. But how? How to step through the Sentinel Tree's portal to cross the bridges. I pull a second cup card, the Ace of Cups, beauty. To love again, to trust again, to look for beauty, to open up to the beauty in life again. But there is always another level of how. Just how do I do that to stay open and trust after trauma? I pondered as I climbed, and nature again began to shape that how. I was on a boundaried path. On one side a waterfall flowing, I could hear it. On the other side the roots of the trees in the forest. Water, earth, boundaries. Literally the elements from the Page of Cups card was here. Water in earth represented solidly around me. The voice said, build your boundaries. Make sure to protect the things that make you feel grounded, but also make sure you protect the things that make you feel free to flow, to chase after your dreams. A combination of rootedness and free flow. This is how. Nature was actually joining in with my tarot reading. Nature as a whole new suit in tarot. This was changing tarot for me, step by step. The sound of water was getting louder, the air was getting easier to breathe, the heat and the mugginess disappearing as I came to the top of this path. It felt like a rebirth. I thought I need a baptism at the end of this path. This is amazing. Water in earth, not codependent love, but boundaried, beautiful love with water in earth, groundedness, my own safety, a free flow and permission to chase my own dreams. As I got to the top of this path and the waterfall sounded louder, I was nearly crying. It felt like a baptism. And as I came over the brow of the hill, nature spoke again. It is a baptism. Find the pool and wash the past away. And there it was. I couldn't believe my eyes. I literally climbed down into that pool with the dogs and covered my face and head with that water. A rebirth, tarot and nature working together to give me the most magical, poignant answers. And so the walk opened up and continued past this bank of pink flowers that whispered, "We are like your name, Candy. Remember us, we will be important." Candy pink flowers, important. I was flummoxed. The path continued to open up and I could sense the other side of this overgrown hedge quite a view. I found a gap and tried to peek through. It was hard to see the view. I stood on tippy toe. That will do, I thought. As I stepped down and carried on walking, a voice reprimanded me. Why will that do? Why will just a hint of a view be okay for you? Are you settling? As I rounded the corner and saw another bench, I thought perhaps I should pull a card on that. Do I settle? But then the landscape spoke to me again, the wet bench, the holes around the bench. It said, no, don't settle for pulling cards here, because actually you do settle and it's caused problems. You fall down holes. It leads you to hurt and traumas. So I pondered that as I walked down this path, the ways I settle, what holes do I fall down. And as I got to the bottom of that path, I was met with a unhindered view, the full view, not a partial view. And there next to it all was another fallen tree. I knew exactly what this tree was talking to me about. It spoke to me about the times I'd willingly walked into mistreatment from people, willingly accepting less because I felt I wasn't worth more. Low self-esteem, lack of self-worth, being at the bottom of everybody's priority list from the get-go had taught me some really bad self-worth lessons. I only thought I was worth seeing half the view. Throw me your scraps, that will do. This is something that I've walked away from in recent years, and it's been hard won. Did I still fall down holes? I continued down and saw some lucky heather. Perhaps I just need more luck, I thought, as I pulled a piece of heather without even thinking. And then as I turned this corner, I felt a furious voice. A voice that yelled about my sovereignty, yelled about not needing luck, just needing to own my worth. A voice that kicked my legs from underneath me, quite literally. I continued to walk and stopped still to look at the heather, and again, even though I wasn't even moving, my legs got kicked from beneath me. All that I managed to capture was the picture of my phone hitting the ground. Don't take plants without asking. I quickly put the heather back and carried on rather sheepishly. Don't take plants without asking. Don't rely on luck. Luck isn't needed. Sovereignty is needed. Self-reliance is needed. Discernment is needed. Boundaries are needed. And self-worth is needed. What to do instead of settling, and how to not fall back down the holes, the next two positions in this spread. As I entered this next fairy tale wood, the wood also whispered, pull some cards about fairy tales while you're at it. Fairy tales of the past, now and the future. So I walked into the fairy tale wood, and there was my bench waiting. Settling and fairy tales, could the two be linked, and how to stop settling, falling down those holes? So I shuffled the cards. What's needed not to settle? The 6 of discs, well-being. 6 discs arranged around a light, a spectrum of colours, all balanced. The well-being refers to the ordered rightness of created things. Well-being, self-respect, self-worth, and how to not fall down holes. Dominion, the 2 of wands, this image as far away from simple luck that you could possibly get. This, a figure in control, decision making, sovereignty. I went on to pull my fairy tale cards. Fairy tales of the past, 2 lovers together dancing, the sun, the happy ever after, all as it should be. Not a house of cards tumbling down. The fairy tale of the present moment, I pulled the 4 of swords, rest, but not a healthy rest, a rest with blades, and the confusion of a poppy in the background. A flower to make you sleep, a confused sleep. This my hiding away, my hermit stage to recover, confusion and needing to wake up. And the fairy tale of the future, of course, my stalker card for August in nearly every reading, the judgment card, the card even currently on my Morrigan altar, being at the brink of a completely new relationship with life, a rebirth. I was being called into action to start again, to build a new fairy tale, this time with me as the main character. Who would have thought? What a novel concept. As I headed towards the latter part of the walk, I thought about the amazingness of this experience I was in the middle of, the believing in the voices that were coming into my head, believing in my imagination, spotting the synchronicities and patterns, the fallen trees, the benches appearing, a physical experience matching the imagined, the voices in my own head somehow melding with the tarot and with nature. Genius low-key speaking, becoming the 5th suit of the tarot. Elemental coincidences, earth, water, the pool, flowers, it was all here. Tarot with a 5th suit of nature. I thanked the moss on the trees, a sign of magic, as I exited this part of the forest. I was stunned, to be honest. As I got to the border of the forest, another voice came in. Count the posts to the tree. These are how many boundaries you need moving forward. Boundary work, it's always been my problem. I've dissolved in and out of people, trying to people please. For a long time, for me, boundaries have felt, well, rude. So I headed back to the car. There'll be somewhere to pull the cards at the car, I was told. I couldn't think where. I hadn't seen anywhere. But trusting the voice of the spirit of place, I headed back to the now empty car park with just my car waiting. And the other side of this sign, through the trees, I spotted something. Yes, you've guessed it. Another bench, waiting for me to pull the cards as promised. So I sat down to pull the boundaries I'd need moving forward. Firstly, the 2 of discs. This speaks of boundaries with myself, to not fall into addictions, to numb. Then the Six of Cups, satisfaction, boundaries about giving to myself and not over giving to other people. Then the Empress, boundaries about carving out time for my creativity, not making that unimportant anymore. And then the Wheel, yes, we know luck isn't a thing here. I need to put boundaries around self-responsibility. The Seven of Swords speaks of boundaries around people who want to take too much. The Princess speaks about boundaries about protecting the earth, my garden. And then the King of Swords, my divorce card, boundaries to keep trusting my intuition, but also looking to my head as well as my heart. But unbelievably, as I walked back to my car, the voices weren't done with me yet. Earlier in the morning, trying to find the forest, I'd taken a wrong turn and I'd ended up here in this village. Walking back to my car at the forest, the voice said, "Go back to the village, visit the church." I didn't quite know what to expect. What I didn't expect was the magic that was to unfold here, linked to those pink flowers I'd seen on the walk. Remember those flowers that said, "We are your name, Candy, remember us"? What you need to know before you enter this old forgotten graveyard is that I changed my name after trauma, my entire name, my first name, my middle name and my surname. I didn't want any part of me remaining that abusers had ever spoken or touched, so I changed my entire name. However, the first grave I saw in amongst the long grass had my old name on it, my first name, my middle name. Next to it, a grave with my mother's name on it, her first name and her middle name. It floored me. Forgotten graves of the past with my old name on. It reminded me of that first upturned tree on the walk, the first trauma. Trauma brought about by ones closest to me. "Okay, give me more names," I asked. In the next row, 3 graves next to each other with the next 3 names on. I was absolutely floored. I thought about the second fallen tree and thought about the circumstances that had spoken to me about. "Give me those names," I said out loud. In the next aisle, another 3 graves together, 3 names on 3 graves, first and middle names on each for the 3 main players of that trauma. As I turned this corner, I was in shock. And the path spoke to me, the path of no man's land. One side was the past, forgotten, overgrown, with all these names on. The other side was more looked after, modern graves. However, the no man's land whispered, "Yes, but we all end up dead. Time is short. Get off no man's land. Forget the past. Let the grass grow." This was unbelievable. This church will forever be known as my church of names now. The pink flowers on the walk had said it all. You're a new person, you changed your name. Get off that middle path of no man's land. Start living again. I was so profoundly moved by this experience that I went back to the forest the very next morning, not to do the white walk anymore, but to do the red walk, a much shorter walk. I just wanted one final moment with that voice that I'd heard to see if there was anything else to say. This shorter walk, again with moss and ferns, a sign of magic. It felt different today. It felt slightly more secret this side of the forest, a completely different atmosphere with fern gullies and streams rolling down. It was absolutely beautiful. And in front of me, after spotting a really exciting mushroom discovery, I saw it. A fallen tree amongst the ferns and the moss. But this fallen tree was different. Its soil around the roots was almost glowing gold. It looked like it had got speckles of gold within it. Immediately I heard the voice again. So, you've been through trauma, who hasn't? But look, there's magic growing in the trauma. I have moss and ferns on me, and gold within the uprooted soil. Mine the trauma for gold. What gifts did it give you? How did it help you? Where did it put you where you would have never got by yourself? As I walked away from the fallen tree, I had to laugh, because there, up on a platform this time, was my bench waiting for me. I kind of knew that this would be my last card for this spread, a spread given to me by Genius Loki over 2 days. I sat down, got my Gill Tarot out and pulled 2 cards. How did the trauma help me? How did it mine for gold? I pulled the 2 of Swords and Death. It gave me peace. Sometimes the worst traumas and the biggest nightmares push you to end something. It pushes you into the death of something, and that's the only way to bring peace. I also felt like the 2 of Swords was saying I had decisions to make moving forward. Remember, we all die. Do you want to waste any more time looking backwards, or are you going to move forwards? Death or renewal? Which one? Another card had fallen out, so I decided to pull another 2 as 2 cards to show me what life could look like if I choose facing forwards. And the 3s came out. 3s for creativity, the 3 of Discs and the 3 of Cups, gain and joy. That says it all. I literally get to gain joy by looking forward. So I pondered these cards and then turned round to rejoin the path, and the voice from the forest went ah 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 as I went to walk the wrong way down the steps. Which way? Are you facing backwards or are you facing forwards? I had to laugh. Of all the benches offered up over the last 2 days, of course this last staircase had to have 2 options, backwards or forwards. Which one? So I finished this spread in absolute awe, with my thoughts of tarot changed forever. The voice of Genius Loki melding so beautifully with the cards, giving me the spread to do and offering me up confirmations within the landscape itself. What an amazing, magical 2 days of tarot. I think I'm forever changed. So, wander into the landscape by yourself with a tarot deck. Listen carefully. Who knows what whispers may be offering up to you? And above all else, if it's just your imagination, then that's magic enough. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.